Well, hello. Good afternoon, friends. Happy Sunday. Hello, hello. Everyone in chat, let me come and say hi. Echoes, hello. Jilly Bean, hope you're still here, although you guys probably dipped out. I got a trigger warning on for today. Okay. William Tardy, hello. Meanie, hello. Joey, happy birthday. Hope it was a good one. Steve W., hello. Who else am I missing? Meanie, did I get you? Shannon Sterling, hello. Amethyst, hi, honey. How you doing? What else am I missing? All right. How's my audio? Hopefully I'm not too loud. I tried to turn it down a little. I don't want to be too loud. Halls, hi. How you doing? Fitzy, there you are, darling. Beepity beep beep beep. Happy Sunday. A hoe named Ida. Welcome on in. Halls, hi. P Fox, yo yo. Hi P Fox. Hi honey. Anna D, hello. 12, how you doing? Beckles, Stacy Martell. Too fast for fleas. Too fast for fleas is not a girl. For the longest time, I've been telling Too Fast for Fleas, you're the most beautiful girl in the world. Because every time I see Too Fast for Fleas over in Kane's Live, Too Fast for Fleas says, tell me I'm pretty. So I just assumed it's a girl. It's not. What up, Too Fast? Angel GB, hello. Yes, Too Fast. You are so pretty. You're beautiful. Too Fast. Sarah D. Irish, hi honey, how are you? Bunny Murphy, hello. Batsheet, hello. Where's Eddie been? James Moen, how you doing? Karma Police, hello. Who else am I missing? Sue Mena, hello. Jackie, hello. Audrey, darling, hello. Good afternoon. How's everybody doing today? Happy Sunday. My audio's good? Okay, good. I turned it down a little. Kent Kearney, hello. Beep beep, bitches. That's right. So, I did have a trigger warning at the beginning of the live. I figured I'd let everybody know. That's why I kind of put it in the title. There's a couple things I wanted to look at today. I was just thinking about it. Probably be a good idea to maybe cover some things that are definitely likely going to be brought up at trial when this goes to trial, especially things concerning injury patterns, wound patterns, things like that. So that's kind of what we're going to look at a little bit today. There are going to be some graphic images, so if anybody doesn't want to see those things, I'll let you know before I'm going to show them. You can click on out or avert your eyes if you need to. These things don't bother me at all, even in the slightest. So if graphic images of stab wounds might bother you, this might not be where you want to be today, friends. Just giving you the heads up now. Danger! What up, Danger? Welcome on in. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of us who it doesn't bother us, right? Nurses, doctors, anybody who works in an emergency room, a trauma center, anything like that. Injuries aren't going to faze you. Stab wounds and things like that aren't going to faze you. So wanted to let everybody know right off the rip, if graphic images bother you, this is not the live for you today. Sue, hello. Thank you so much for your super sticker. What is that, a super sticker? Super sticker. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Thank you. Huge storms coming through for you, Amethyst. Oh, hunker down. Yes, consider yourselves warned. Hello, Mary P. Happy birthday, April babies. You worked in surgery, Jackie. You're good. Okay, perfect. Yeah, there you go. So anybody who's ever worked in surgery, if you've ever worked, right? This probably won't bug you. However, if you are an empath, or maybe you are not used to seeing gory things like some of us are, this may bother you. So yeah, P. Fox, see, pathology. Yeah, I know this won't bother you. This is not going to bother Mercy Cat. This is not going to bother many of us, simply because of our background. So this isn't going to bother us at all. But I figured it's probably a good idea maybe to do some, just a little, we'll cover a few things that are likely going to be talked about once this thing goes to trial, whether we like it or not. They may not show injuries or anything like that to the public. But it's going to be talked about. It is what it is. The medical examiners are going to have to come up and they are going to have to describe the injuries on each victim that they, witnessed, to determine, was it a sharp force? Was it right? So, all of that we'll cover. Too fast for please. Thank you so much. Ow, ow. I'm a real boy now. Ow. Oh, that's a good one. Thank you so much for your super chat. That is some funny shit right there. I'm a real boy now. Marty, welcome on in. Thanks for being here. Woke up or hello. Won't bother me. You used to be a nurse's aide, Anna D. Okay, so there you go. Yeah. Oh, that's what I mean. This is probably not going to bother a lot of us. I would imagine most of us. If you have an interest in true crime, you probably aren't going to be thwarted by some graphic images. I just figured I'd give everybody that warning right off the bat that today's live might not be for you if you don't want to see images of stab wounds and things like that. But mods, love you. Thank you for being here. You guys are freaking awesome. Hope everybody's having a great Sunday. Yeah, exactly. Puncture wounds versus tears, right? We'll go over everything. I got a few tabs open. We'll look at a couple of things here. Don't want to waste too much time. I do have to leave in a little bit, so probably going to be here about an hour today. Maybe just a little bit longer than an hour. Won't try to keep you guys too long. Donna, Salamander, hello, welcome on in. If there's anybody else coming in the chat and I missed you, sorry. Says there's almost 100 people here watching already. Hit the like, give it a thumbs up, give it a thumbs down. You know what to do. Let's get into this. Fitzy. Fitzy says, I'm no doctor, nor am I attorney, but I have an interest in graphic things. There you go. All right, so let's look at this one first. We'll go here. And you know what? Let me, before I do anything, because I forgot to put all these links in the description of the video. So I'll give them to you guys if you want to follow along. I'll put them in chat. That way you have all the links too. Do whatever you like with them. You know the rules, right? You can print them, laminate them, frame them, do whatever you like. Let's give you that. There we go. First one we're looking at here. Let's see. Put that there for you. Anybody want to click that link? This is what we're going to be looking at first. There's a couple of images in this one. Nothing too graphic at the end of it. It's really nothing too crazy. Let's see. This is from the labmedicineblog.com, August 25th, 2023. Autopsy examination of sharp force injuries. It says, in television and movies, you'll sometimes see a scene where the pathologist describes to a detective the specific dimensions of a knife used in an attack, all based on the autopsy findings. While this is no doubt extremely helpful to an investigation and the limits of a 60-minute runtime, it's also impossible to provide this level of detail from an autopsy. Unfortunately, the pervasiveness of such creative liberties in pop culture creates unrealistic expectations from juries, lawyers, and law enforcement, which we often need to gently correct. There are certain characteristics we can identify which may clarify what kind of blade was used, but conversely, may not match the dimensions of the weapon at all. While any object with a pointed or edged tip can be used to inflict sharp force injuries, we will focus on knives as the stereotypical sharp force weapon. As a reminder, sharp force injuries have clean, neat edges and no tissue bridging in the wound depths. These are the features that are used to distinguish sharp force from lacerations, which are skin tears due to blunt force injury. And then that also says see last month's blog post for a refresher on that. The most important first step for any instance of sharp force injury is to fully X-ray the body. This allows for identification of potential evidence to discover, such as a broken knife tip, and identifies potential sharp hazards for the prosecutor. I think that meant to say prosecutor. Let me stop here for 1 second. Sorry, I can't see my chat, but it does say here. So the most important first step for any instance of sharp force injury is to fully X-ray the body. Okay. The first issue when interpreting sharp force injuries at autopsy is distortion of wounds by skin elasticity. Depending on the location and orientation of the wound, the edges may be pulled by tension along Langer's lines. If this is the case, reapproximating the wound edge is needed before measuring for better accuracy. So like if you have this open wound, you're going to want to pull the two sides of the wound together as close as you can, approximating the wound edges. You need to approximate the wound edges. It's needed before measuring for better accuracy. The ends of a stab wound may reflect whether a blade has one or two edges, depending on whether both ends are tapered, two-edged, or if one end is blunt and the other is tapered, single-edged. The morphology isn't always clear, though. Occasionally, a double-edged blade will have a blunt edge segment known as the ricasso, just before the crossguard or handle. If the blade is fully inserted, the impression of the ricasso may make the wound appear to have two blunt edges. The second difficulty faced is that knife wounds are rarely inflicted on a stationary body. There is typically, at least initially, a struggle involving motion of both the victim and the blade. Let's read that again. The second difficulty faced is that knife wounds are rarely inflicted on a stationary body. There is typically a struggle involving motion of both the knife, the victim, and the blade. This can result in wounds which are distorted from the dimensions of the weapon. These kinds of wounds also don't necessarily imply that the person holding the knife was torturing the victim. It just means that there was motion between the body and the blade. For example, a dovetail or V-shaped wound can be created if the knife is inserted and removed at different angles. This could happen if either the victim is moving, if the assailant moves the angle of the knife, or both. Another relatively frequent source of confusion is depth of wound relative to the length of the blade. All soft tissues are compressible, but certain parts of the body have a little more give. For example, the relatively soft abdominal pannus and viscera are easily compressed, whereas the chest is held in a rigid position by the rib cage. Therefore, it's very possible for a 5-inch blade to leave a wound 8 inches in depth if inflicted in a soft location like the abdomen. Additionally, if a blade isn't inserted to the full length, the wound depth could also be shorter than the weapon. One concerning trope on television is the immediate reconstruction of a crime based on autopsy findings. As one example, much emphasis is placed in the media on identifying defensive wounds. However, there is no way to tell at autopsy if a wound was sustained defensively or aggressively. And to be fair, even if the incident was caught on camera, there could be differing interpretations. There are characteristics which are more commonly seen in defensive wounds, such as locations on the hands and forearms as the victim attempts to block or grab the weapon. Hand wounds can also be seen on the assailant, though, as blood can make their hand slip onto the cutting blade during thrusts. Similarly, it is never possible to ascertain the handedness of an assailant from the wound pattern. It is never possible to ascertain the handedness of an assailant from the wound pattern. Serrated knives may leave a characteristic. There's a graphic image coming up after I read these two little paragraphs here, friends. Serrated knives may leave a characteristic pattern of abrasions on the body, but may leave no mark depending on the angle of the wound. So if such marks are present, it's distinctive of a serrated weapon. But if they are absent, the weapon could be either serrated or straight-edge blade. Contrary to what is shown on TV, there is no way to definitively match one specific knife to a particular wound. Contrary to what is shown on TV, there is no way to definitively match one specific knife to a particular wound. The closest we could get would be finding a broken segment of the blade within the body. And even then, one must imagine there is more than one knife in the world that has a broken tip. While the world would be such a much simpler place if such answers were possible, it's our duty as scientists and physicians to be honest about the limitations of science and avoid speculation. So it says here, this is a stab wound inflicted by a knife with a single-edged blade, characterized by a squared-off blunt end at the top of the photo and a tapered sharp end at the bottom of the photo. So it's showing you down here, see how it's a sharper edge here, whereas up here it's more rounded. And then to get a better, right, showing you here. In order for them to have a more precise visualization of what kind of knife could, they would have to put the two sides back together, try and get it back together. It says this stab wound initially has a very unclear morphology on the left due to tension placed on the wound by skin elasticity and nearby sutures. Once the wound is reapproximated on the right, there are clearly two tapered edges, which may be consistent with a double-edged blade. You can clearly see it on both sides here. And the lady who wrote this is here, Allison Krywanchik. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. She was at the time of writing this, the deputy medical examiner at the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office. So I didn't just, pull this out of my ass. Stop sharing that one real quick. I'll be back over to chat in 1 minute, friends. Sorry, give me 1 second. We're going to look at some pretty graphic images here. So if you want to click yourself right on out, you go ahead, because the next screen that I'm about to bring up is going to be quite the, just so you guys know. Okay. So what I just showed you was mild compared to what we're about to get into next. I'm not even sure if I'm going to get copyrighted for this shit. That's why I'm saying this live is intended specifically for educational purposes only. We will be looking at graphic content. We will be talking about graphic information concerning knife attacks. And, click on out if these kinds of things maybe make you a little woozy, okay? Kane B, what up? Oh my God, let me come back to chat. Hi guys, sorry I'm missing a whole bunch of you. Moonlight, hello. How are you? Sherry Irwin, hello. Thank you for being here. Justice, hello. Who else am I missing? If I missed you, I'm sorry. Hi, welcome on in. Hopefully my mods welcomed you on in. Thanks everybody for being here. So, as we could just see, according to that chief medical examiner there, it's absolutely impossible, even if you have the weapon. You cannot definitively say this weapon caused this injury, right? And she even makes it clear it's imperative that you stick to the science of it and not avoid the speculation, right? So, all right. Next window I'm about to open. This is your last warning. Click yourself on out. Because it's about to get real up in her. All right, I can't see my chat friends. Here we go. Mods, you will have to keep an eye on chat. So as we can see here, we have many, many different patterns of sharp force injury going on here. As you can see, there are examples of where the knife was still left in the victim. We have sharp force trauma on hands here. Could be defensive, could not be. That's kind of what they're getting at. A lot of the times you assume when you find the victim, injuries on the hands, well, they were defending themselves. The problem is that sometimes, many times, the injury patterns on the hands could also indicate that's your perpetrator. Many times the perpetrator will injure themselves on their hands from stabbing someone. They will also sustain injuries. So it's incredibly difficult for the medical examiners to determine if what you're looking at is a defensive wound or is this person a perpetrator, right? As we can see here. So hopefully you guys, don't freak out. Some of these we're going to click on. Some of them are pretty wild. It is what it is. This is why I gave everybody the trigger warning. Cut yourself right on out of here. Click on out. So this one is like, we have one here. This is for axe patterns. Okay. Sharp force injuries, wound patterns on hands, things like that. So, when we're talking about, now we don't know definitively, right? How many injuries each victim sustained, we don't know for sure, other than what some of the families have said. We know in particular one of the family members said that they felt their child got the worst of it, which adds another level to the crime, right? Because now you're saying he did it in 8 minutes, but he also spent more time with one victim, which is pretty extraordinary when you think about it, right? So I just wanted to show you quick few different visuals here. And I'm going to keep that tab open because we'll go back to it in a minute. Well, we don't know that, Justice. We have no idea how many times she was stabbed. Nobody has ever said anything about anyone's injuries or how many times they were stabbed or anything like that. That's never come out. All we know is that her father said, the wound patterns don't match, right? Something like that. Points of damage. That's the word that he used. Points of damage don't match. That's all that we know. The points of damage don't match. We have no idea who sustained what injuries. We know that the coroner said it was a large weapon that was used. There was lots of blood, but nobody's ever actually given a definitive. So that's why I said, I wanted to talk about the different types of wound patterns that could be sustained here. And that's why I wanted to show some images as well of the different types of injuries you may see. Let's go to this one here. So this is pathologyoutlines.com. Get into this one. Was this the one I wanted to? Oh, no, wait, it was the other one. Sorry, guys. Let me get to the other one. It was this one. Yeah, I'm not sure where the number comes from, to be honest with you. I have no idea where the whole number came from. But I've read these documents thoroughly, and nowhere has either side said anything about how many injuries, how many anything on a victim. So I don't know where people come up with that. All right, so this is the forensic autopsy of sharp force injuries. This was written, it was updated December 22nd, 2022. We have an overview here. Injuries produced by pointed objects or objects with sharp edges are referred to as sharp force injuries. This is how Payne characterized Xana's injuries as well. Sharp force, if I remember correctly. I don't have the PCA up. He said the girls, Kaylee and Maddie, had visible stab wounds. Xana was sharp force. And then Ethan's came from the medical examiner. What did they call his? It's escaping my brain. One of the big brains in chat will know. So it's interesting that even Payne in the PCA describes each victim with different injuries as he comes upon them. One has sharp force, one has visible stab wounds, and then whatever they ended up saying, maybe the sharp force was Ethan. But I know sharp force injuries is in that PCA. Sharp force injuries are characterized by a relatively well-defined traumatic separation of tissues occurring when a sharp edge or pointed object comes into contact with the skin and underlying tissues. 3 specific subtypes of sharp force injuries exist as follows: stab wounds, that's what it was, incised wounds. Whoops. Get out of there. Stab wounds, incised wounds, and chop wounds. So these are going to be your 3 subtypes of sharp force injury: stab, incise, and chop. Along with other primitive injury types such as blunt force trauma, drowning, thermal injury, and other environmentally induced forms of injury, sharp force injuries have been around for a long time. Numerous accounts of deaths due to sharp force trauma are documented in the Old Testament of the Bible as follows. When Phinehas saw this, he left the assembly, took a spear in his hand, and followed the Israelite into the tent. He drove the spear through the both of them, through the Israelite and into the woman's body. Picked up a tent peg and a hammer and went quietly to him while he lay fast asleep. She drove the peg through his temple into the ground, and he died. All right. Even with the advent of more modern injury types, such as gunshot wounds, motor vehicle collisions, medical therapy-related incidents, and injury related to alternating current electricity, sharp force injuries have remained relatively common within the world of death investigation. In fact, as society has become more modern, a variety of new, more advanced sharp force injury types have emerged. In this chapter, we will discuss sharp force injuries and the deaths that result from such injuries. Epidemiology. Deaths due to sharp force injuries are less common than those due to blunt trauma, gunshot wounds, asphyxial mechanisms, and drug toxicity. The frequency of such deaths varies from one jurisdiction to another. The most common manner of death associated with sharp force trauma is homicide, followed by suicide. Accidental sharp force injury fatalities do not occur but are relatively rare. A study performed at an urban medical trauma center evaluated the trauma deaths that passed through the emergency department during an 11-year period from 1994 to 2005. Sharp force stab wounds accounted for 11% of the cases, compared to gunshot wounds, 56%, and then it gives you the rest. A report by the Centers for Disease Control evaluated violent deaths occurring in 39 states, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico during the year 2018. In the report, a violent death is defined as a death resulting from the intentional use of physical force or power against oneself, another person, or a group or community. Sharp force injuries accounted for 1.9% of all suicides, compared with the top 3 means of suicide being firearms, hanging, strangulation, 30%, poisoning, 12%. Sharp force injuries accounted for 10.6% of all homicides. Oh, you know what? Let me give you guys this link in chat too. Hang on. Sorry. If you're just joining chat and I missed you, I'm sorry. I can't see my chat. I'm coming to drop the link. That way, if you want to follow along, there you go. That's what we're reading right now. You can follow along. Overview of the entity. As mentioned above, the term sharp force injury encompasses essentially three separate but related injury types. Stab or puncture wounds are produced by sharp pointed objects wherein the direction of force is more perpendicular to the skin surface as opposed to tangential or parallel. In most instances, the wound is deeper than it is long on the skin surface. In contrast, incised or cut wounds are produced by sharp edge objects, wherein the direction of force is more tangential or parallel to the skin surface as opposed to perpendicular. In most circumstances, the wound is longer on the skin surface than it is deep. Chop wounds can be considered a combination of sharp and blunt force trauma, wherein a relatively bulky object with an edge or a fast-moving object with an edge impacts the body, resulting in injuries that have features of sharp force trauma as well as those of blunt force trauma. Indications for the procedure. Sharp force injuries fall under the jurisdiction of the medical examiner or coroner. Although not as common as firearm-related injuries, these injuries are often seen in suicides and homicides. Sharp force injuries are also encountered in the setting of multiple injuries related to motor vehicle accidents. Detailed examination of sharp force injuries, particularly in homicides, can provide useful information regarding the type of weapon that likely inflicted the wounds. This information can potentially guide the police to the recovery of a murder weapon, or it can be used to exclude other implements recovered from a crime scene. So I just wanted to share that one with you quickly, gave you that. So that told us the three different kinds. You have your chop wounds, right? Your incise wound and your stab wound. Okay, cool. Gave you the link for that. Let me close that one out. There's that one. Let me make sure I got the right one here. Yeah, that's the one with the diagram. Okay, cool. So, come back over here, share this one with you. Sorry, I'm just going to try and get through this because I do have, sorry friends, I actually do have other things to do today. Figured I have a couple of hours, about an hour and a half is what we're doing here, so. All right, I'll give you this one as well. Let's copy that. I'm going to put this in chat. This is the next one that we're going to. Same here. You can follow along. Okay. So now that we know we have under sharp force injuries, you're going to have what? Chop wounds, incise wounds, stab wounds. Those are like your three categories that your medical examiner, your coroner, right? That's what they would be determining what they're looking at on the victims. They need to determine, are we looking at chop wounds? Are we looking at, right, deeper than it is wide? Right. Okay, cool. Everybody's tracking? Okay, cool. If there's anybody joining in chat and I missed you, so sorry. Hopefully mods welcomed you on in. I was in another window reading. So thank you everybody for being here, and thank you for your freaking super stickers or whatever they are, super chats, super stickers. Thanks guys, really appreciate you. Let's see here. So this one, try and get through this one pretty quickly. This is the review of patterns in homicides by sharp force, one institution's experience. Now, this is going to be, this paper presents a retrospective review of patterns found in cases of homicides by sharp force over a 13-year period at the Department of Forensic Pathology of the Ostrava University Hospital, Czech Republic. Now, yes, I understand it's not the United States. That's not the point. Sharp force injury fatalities are frequently encountered in forensic medicine. The manner of death in such cases is most frequently classified as homicide, followed by suicide and accident. Interestingly, a correlation can be seen between the gun control legislation existing in a specific country and the frequency of homicides involving sharp force. It is true. They give you all this stuff down here in countries where they have strict gun control. Death by stabbing is way higher. You're very likely to be attacked by someone with a knife, which makes sense, right? I mean, you could ban the knives too, and they'll just, if somebody wants to kill you, they're going to kill you. I guess it doesn't matter what they use, right? Knife, rock, baseball bat, whatever, car. They'll figure it out. If they want to kill you, they're going to kill you. So we'll get through all of this. Taking the Czech Republic as an example of a country with rather strict gun control laws, the authors report that in their jurisdictions, sharp force fatalities represented 38.1% of all homicides between 2008 and 2020. Okay. Let's get down here. Methods. So these are the methods that they use. The autopsy files of the Department of Forensic Pathology, which provided autopsy services for the Moravian Silesian region, with a population of 1.9 million people, were searched for sharp force injury fatalities over a 13-year period from 2008 to 2020. Sharp force-related case files and autopsy reports were reviewed. Sex and age of victims and perpetrators, the place of death, the nature of the assault, the type of the sharp weapon used, the presence of clothes defects, the number and location of wounds, the presence and localization of defensive wounds, the cause of death, toxicological findings of victims and perpetrators, and their relationship were summarized. So it's just telling you everything in here. So these are their results. Let's see. Between 2008 and 2020, a total of 14,327 autopsies were performed at the Department of Forensic Pathology. Sharp force injury fatalities accounted for 167 cases, including 91 suicides, 71 homicides, 5 accidental. Of the 71 cases that were homicide, 43 victims were male, 28 female. 5 of all of the victims were younger than 18. The age of the victims ranged from 0 to 79 years. Can you imagine that? Someone, 0 years old, someone stabbed a baby. Wild. Age of the victims ranged from 0 to 79. And the median age of male and female victims was 47 and 43, respectively. The available evidence and police investigation indicate that 69 perpetrators were responsible for the total of 71 homicides. The lack of one-to-one correspondence is accounted for by the fact that in 4 cases, a single perpetrator killed 2 people, and 2 acts were committed by 2 perpetrators. Of all the perpetrators, as many as 68 were caught, and only 1 remained unidentified. Of the identified perpetrators, a total of 72% were male and 28% were female. Interestingly, only male perpetrators were responsible for the cases of double homicide. The median age of male and female perpetrators was 46 and 48 years old. 48% of the cases, the victim and the perpetrator were family members or partners. 48%. In 24%, they were friends. And in 28%, the perpetrator did not know the victim. Of the total of 71 homicides, 75% took place at home, houses, huts, etc. And the rest of the homicides took place at public areas, including streets, pubs, and a swimming pool. All right, so let's go down here. In the majority of cases, 93%, the appearance of the wounds indicated the use of 1 or more knives, while only 7% of cases involved other sharp tools, such as screwdriver, scissors, or an axe. So majority of the cases, 93%, the appearance of the wounds indicate the use of 1 or more knife. In 58% of the cases, the offending tool was found at the crime scene or in its proximity. Almost 60%. Which is why the other day when I did that live about Idaho, where are the knives? Because we know that them and all their friends own knives. And it's incredibly unbelievable that not a single bladed weapon was recovered from this home and all you got was the sheath. I don't buy it. That's just my personal opinion. Even in their own study here out in the Czech Republic, almost 60% of the cases, the offending tool was found at the crime scene or in its proximity. In a mere 8% of cases, the offending tool was found to be stabbed in the victim's body still. Right? So that leaves open the, I know it sounds fucked up to think about, but 8%, that seems pretty high. That's still pretty high to me. That's almost 10% of your cases where the knife is still in the victim when police arrive. In 82% of the cases, the victims were transported to the Department of Forensic Pathology in their clothing. While in 14% of the cases, the clothes were secured by the police at the crime scene or in the ambulance. And in only 4% of the cases, the clothes were not deliverable at all. In 2 cases, the clothes were destroyed by fire, and 1 victim was murdered while taking a shower. So there would be no clothes, right? But they're saying almost all of their cases, the clothes are brought with the victim, transported to pathology. Usually you would go, that sounds about right. From the scene, not only are you going to be bagged, they're going to bag your hands, right? They're going to bag and tape off the hands. You're going to go straight to the medical examiner's office or whatever pathology office they used in Spokane. I believe Moscow contracted with Spokane, if I remember correctly. Clothes, whatever they were wearing, should have been transported with them. And then down here, it gives us the table, right? So it tells you on this little table here, summary of case details. The numbers represent the absolute frequencies and relative frequencies in percentages in the brackets. Tells you here, so the sex of the victim, we have 43% are male, 28% female, 53% occurred at home, 66%, the offending tool was the knife. Offending tool found at the crime scene, yes. Clothing damage, yes. That's why they want the clothes too, because they can see, if you're stabbed with your clothes on, obviously, all of those tears and everything to the clothes, they're going to match it to the wounds on your body and stuff like that. So it gives us this little diagram here, and it shows us the percentages. So it says most of the homicide cases involved multiple sharp force injuries, 79%. So 80%, multiple stab wounds, right? Single sharp injury was found in 21% of the cases. The most frequently injured body area was the left portion of the chest, 50% of the cases. Left portion of the chest. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it gives you all these different percentages here. And this is going to be the left portion of the chest at the heart area. Tends to be where if somebody wants to stab you, that's the area they're going to go for. They're shooting for your heart. Or they're going to come up and try to get underneath your ribs in the abdomen here and get your, try and get to your liver, kidneys, things like that. How's everybody doing in chat? Let me come and say hello. I did. I just flashed you. I flashed you, Fitzy. I know I probably should put a blur over his little pee-pee there, huh? Jonas Beer, how you doing? Welcome on in. Thanks for being here. Yeah. We all heard the same thing in the beginning, allegedly water. Someone was taking a shower or something. Who knows, right? Who fucking knows anymore with this case? Ro, how you doing? Amy Conway, hello. Robin, hello. James Moen, Yvonne Poole. If I missed you guys, sorry. I'm sure you know when I'm in another window, I can't see y'all. Happy Sunday, everybody. Thanks for being here. Ooh, there's a lot of people who clicked out, huh, when we started getting to the graphic shit. They all dipped out, right? V, how you doing? Yeah. Well, that's what I'm thinking too, Fitzy. I don't know though. Something tells me that, like I said, I don't believe for a single second no knife was recovered from this house. I don't care what anybody says. I just don't believe it. I just don't. And that's, If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I find it to be very unlikely. No weapon was recovered. It's like 80% of cases, for God's sake, the weapon is there. It's left at the scene. So it's the most unusual thing for you to only have the sheath, to have no weapon. You didn't recover a single knife from this house. Bullshit. I call bullshit. But, anyways, so as we can see here, according to their little study, 49% of people stabbed tends to be right here, left chest area. 38% is going to be the right chest area. They give you some other percentages here. 41% in the back. Talk about being actually stabbed in the back, right? Tells you the most common cause of death was by hemorrhagic shock, 33%, followed by heart, neck, and intrathoracic vessel injury, as shown in Table 2. The results are in agreement with the published studies. Let's see. This study aimed to determine the following. 1, the number of cases where the fatal sharp force assault was preceded by a blunt force assault, and the presence of blunt force defensive wounds in such cases. So, number 1 here, they want to determine the number of cases where the fatal sharp force assault was preceded by blunt force assault. Was this person attacked first, then stabbed? Were they hit over the head first, right? Were they knocked unconscious first? Anything like that. Punched, kicked, right? And the presence of blunt force defensive wounds. They're also looking to see if this person tried to defend themselves before being stabbed. 2, the number of sharp force injuries sustained by the victims, including any defensive wounds and the sex distribution thereof. 3, positive toxicological findings in both perpetrator and victim and the sex distribution thereof. Blunt force assault. This section analyzes the presence of injuries inflicted by kicks, punches, or a blunt tool, as well as the presence of blunt force defensive wounds. Presence of blunt force. Injuries located in the upper part of the skull or in central part of the face, meaning the orbits, nose, and lips, were attributed to blunt force assault. The injuries were caused by kicks, punches, or blunt tools such as the knife handle, barbell, hammer, and an axe butt. The data showed that blunt force assault preceded the sharp force assault in 27% of the cases. So in approximately 30% of your cases, before the person was stabbed, there was some kind of blunt force assault that took place. Whether it was they were hit with the handle of the knife, a barbell, a hammer, the butt of an axe, a golf club, something else took place first in approximately 30% of the cases. They give you the little table down here. Presence of blunt force defensive wounds. Injuries located in the dorsal part of the hand and the ulnar side of the forearm were assessed as blunt force defensive wounds. The presence of such wounds was found in 23% of the cases. No significant difference in sex distribution was found. Presence of both blunt force and blunt force defensive wounds. The presence of both blunt force and blunt force defensive wounds was found in 21% of male victims and 11% of female. Of note is the fact that the blunt force assaulting preceding the sharp force assault was only present in cases involving male perpetrators. Of note is the fact that the blunt force assault preceding the sharp force assault was only present in cases involving male perpetrators, meaning the females who committed the stabbings, they weren't beating someone over the head first before they stabbed them. There wasn't a blunt force assault that preceded the stabbing. That was only present in cases involving male perpetrators. Sharp force assault. This section evaluates the number of sharp force injuries and the sex distribution, as well as the presence of sharp force defensive wounds. Types of wounds. The majority of cases involved incise and stab wounds, while slash wounds were identified in 2 cases. Number of wounds. The number of sharp force injuries ranged from 1 to 68. The victims were assigned to 3 groups according to the number of injuries shown in Table 4. The data reveals a significant difference in the number of injuries in male and female victims, with female victims suffering a higher number of injuries. Interesting. Number of wounds and defensive wounds. The numbers represent the absolute frequencies. So let's see, number of wounds here. Women. So men, it looks like, let's see, 1, 2 to 9, 10 plus, total, 27, 12, and 15. Interesting. Defensive wounds. 38, 21, 17. Sharp force defensive wounds were present in 54% of the cases. Unfortunately, they could not be assessed in 4% of the cases owing to extensive thermal damage. Okay, so they were burnt. Okay. No such wounds were present in the rest of the cases. So sharp force defensive wounds were present in 54% of the stabbing cases. So almost 60% of your stabbing cases, you're going to see sharp force defensive wounds, according to this study anyway, right? Let's see. Figure 2 shows the number of sharp force defensive wounds, indicating a significant relationship between the number of injuries and defensive wounds. The defensive wounds were most often localized on the left hands and forearms. Interesting. Left hand. Isn't that the clippings from Maddie was on her left hand, her left fingernail clippings, correct? Let me come over to chat here. If I remember correctly. Left fingernail clippings of Maddie Mogan, correct? Oh, thank you, Meanie. Yes, okay. Edged weapon, visible stab, and okay, yeah. Thank you, Meanie. Okay. Well, AR, how you doing? Welcome on in. Appreciate you. So, someone answer me, please. Left fingernail clippings of Maddie Mogan, correct? Thank you, Kane. Appreciate you. Okay, so let's read that again. Figure 2 shows the number of sharp force defensive wounds, indicating a significant relationship between the number of injuries and defensive wounds. The defensive wounds were most often localized on the left hands and forearms. Interesting. Limb penetration and partial finger amputation was present in only 8%. Interesting. Okay. A relation between the number of wounds and defensive wounds in total. Fisher's exact test. And in male and female victims, the numbers represent the absolute frequencies. Interesting. Total, and then we have male and female. Number of wounds, 2 to 9 here. Interesting. Toxicological finds. All victims and most of the perpetrators were tested for the presence of alcohol and other relevant substances. They usually do that in it's been my understanding that that's what they do. It's automatic. Whether you're stabbed, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's automatic now. Usually, most medical examiners are taking toxicology and they're running it no matter what. Whether they think it might be relevant to the crime or not, they're still going to run it. Blood alcohol testing was performed in 99% of the victims. See? So even out there in the Czech Republic, 99% of the victims that came through this forensic pathology place, blood alcohol testing is done. Alcohol intoxication was found in 59%. of the victims. Almost 60% of the victims were intoxicated. The victims. And the degree of intoxication is shown in Table 5. A statistically significant difference was found between male and female victims, with male victims being intoxicated more frequently. Interesting. Furthermore, cannabis intoxication was found in one case. Combined cannabis and methamphetamine intoxication was found in one place. Okay. Let's see. Okay. If possible, the perpetrators were also tested for the presence of alcohol. Unfortunately, the testing could not be performed in 24% of the cases. In cases where the perpetrator was arrested within a short time after committing the crime, a retrospective calculation was performed to determine the blood alcohol level at the time of committing the crime. The applied rate of decline after the reaching of the peak of the curve was 0.0122 to 0.20. Okay. The level of alcohol intoxication is shown in Table 6. No statistically significant difference was found between male and female perpetrators. In addition, 3 perpetrators were tested positive for cannabis, 1 for methamphetamine, 1 was both cannabis and toluene. I don't know what that is. All right. In general, the results of this study, such as the number of male victims being higher than female, are consistent with available studies dealing with sharp force injury fatalities. Since this study aims to be comprehensive and include as many factors as possible, it proved to be rather challenging to find similar studies for other jurisdictions with data for all criteria reported. Therefore, this section will discuss the results and compare them with other published studies. Unlike in other studies where the percentage of female victims ranged from 30 to 35%, it was slightly higher in this study, namely 39%. In general, the male to female ratio in the published studies varies from 2 to 5, with the exception of the study in Belgith et al. Involving Aboriginal population in Central Australia, where female victims accounted for 53% of all victims. Such high number of female victims in the Aborigines population could be explained by the use of traditional punishment, which is still practiced in Central Australia. While the age of the victims in developing countries ranges from 20 to 30 years old, developed countries show a significantly higher average age of the victims. Let's see. As reported in the results, 73% of the victims die immediately after assault, owing to the extent and lethal nature of the sustained injuries. Only 10% of all the victims were admitted to hospital. The victims who stayed alive long enough to be transported to hospital sustained penetrating stab wounds with no severe internal organ damage. Let's see. For illustrative purpose, the typical case scenario can be summarized as follows. A male perpetrator assaulting his victim at home using a knife. The victim and the perpetrator were related or knew each other. This scenario is also consistent with the results of other studies from Europe and Japan. Of note is the fact that in Tunisia, sharp force homicides were most commonly committed in public places, which is in contrast with both the majority of the published studies and with the study presented in this paper. Published studies report that the offending weapon was found at the crime scene or in the proximity of the crime scene 49 to 53% of the time. In our cohort, the frequency of the presence of the weapon at the crime scene is slightly higher, almost 60%, 58%. 8% of the cases, the weapon was found to be still in the victim's body. This finding slightly differs from the studies by Terranova or by Thompson et al., who reported the offending weapon stabbed in the victim's body 3.3% and 4.5% respectively. And then it talks about the frequency of the clothing defects for sharp force homicides as reported ranges from 71 to 89%. In this study, clothes defects were seen in 83% of the cases. The more wounds suffered, the more frequent the clothes damage. In cases of single wounds, closed defects were found in 83% of the cases, which is consistent with the findings reported by Burke et al., who reported closed defects in 85% of their cases with single stab wounds. Let's see. Previous studies have identified the thorax neck to be the most common site of sharp force injuries suffered in homicides, with the heart and the large vessels being the most frequently injured organs, which is in agreement with the findings of the present study. Such findings could be well explained by the fact that the victim and the assailant were facing each other at the moment of the assault, and possibly the assailant's general knowledge of human anatomy and the position of the vital organs and vessels. The study also aimed to determine whether the sharp force assault was preceded by a blunt force assault. Such use of the blunt force may be expected in cases of conflict escalation when the perpetrator believes to be stronger than the victim. Such assaults were committed only by male perpetrators against both male and female victims, with little difference across the sexes. To be precise, 26% of male victims and 29% of female victims suffered such injuries before the fatal sharp force assault, which is contrary to what one would expect, i.e., higher incidence of such injuries in female victims due to their physical condition. The frequency of blunt force defensive wounds did not show a significant difference across the sexes. With respect to sharp force assault, there was a statistically significant difference in the number of sharp force injuries in male and female victims, with male victims suffering fewer injuries, including defensive wounds. The sharp force defensive wounds were found in 54% of all cases. Previous studies have shown the presence of such defensive wounds to be 31 to 64% of the cases of homicidal deaths from sharp weapon injury. The percentage increases if the number of the stab wounds is higher. In our cohort, the presence of defensive wounds was found in 85% of the victims who suffered more than 10 stab wounds. Similarly, Thompson et al. Report the presence of defensive wounds in 76.2% of the cases where the victim suffered more than 10 stab wounds. In the studied cases, the presence of defensive wounds was found in 49% of male victims and 61% of female. The difference in frequency at the presence of defensive wounds between male and female victims may possibly be explained not only by the number of the suffered wounds, but also by higher blood alcohol level in the male victims, which could compromise both their self-defense as well as motor coordination. Let's read that one again. The difference in frequency of the presence of defensive wounds between male and female victims may possibly be explained not only by the number of the suffered wounds, but also by the higher blood alcohol level in the male victims, which would compromise both their self-defense as well as motor coordination. The most frequent sites of defensive wounds includes fingers, palms, and the dorsal side of the hands, with the dominance of left hand. Isn't that wild? So, and the largest amount of when people defend themselves, it seems to be when they're trying to put their hands up because someone's coming at them with a knife. For some reason, it's the left hand dominance there. This conclusion is in contrast with published studies which report the palmar site of the right hand to be the most frequently injured part of the body during defense. There was a comparatively high incidence of injuries in the left arm and shoulder, meaning in sites adjacent to the left side of the thorax, which may be explained by the fact that such injuries may either qualify as defensive wounds or primary injuries caused by sharp force assault against the torso, which makes their interpretation challenging. The results showed that the higher the number of sharp force injuries, the higher the number of defensive wounds. Defensive wounds were present in all victims who suffered more than 10 sharp force injuries and died due to hemorrhagic shock, meaning there was no injury directly causing the death. A special case was a victim who suffered 72 sharp force injuries, predominantly in the area of the neck and upper part of the thorax, but no defensive wounds were present. This case involved a brutal assault, and it can be assumed that some of the initial injuries were fatal and thus prevented the victim from defending herself. Finally, the study also assessed the intoxication of both victims and perpetrators. In terms of alcohol intoxication, zero blood alcohol level was found in 67% of female victims and only 21% of male. This is in agreement with results from Scandinavia published by Rogue et al., who found that 35% of male and 63% of female victims had zero blood alcohol level. In most cases, the blood alcohol level was within the level of severe and life-threatening alcohol intoxication. This is in contrast to the findings by Belgith et al., who reported the frequency of alcohol-intoxicated victims in Tunisia of only 4.2%. The difference may be explained by higher alcohol consumption by Europeans compared to other countries, especially Islamic countries. Yeah, true. Intoxication involving other substances was rather rare. The perpetrators were tested for the blood alcohol level only in 76% of the cases, and severe or life-threatening intoxication was found in approximately 1/3 of male and female perpetrators. Conclusions. In many aspects, this study has confirmed what has been published on sharp force homicides earlier. What differs is the higher incidence of female victims as well as higher age of both male and female victims. Furthermore, the number of sharp force injuries suffered by female victims was significantly higher than that suffered by male victims. No statistically significant difference was found between the number of blunt force injuries suffered by male and female victims before the fatal sharp force assault. Such injuries were present in approximately 25% of the victims, and the cases usually involved a male perpetrator. Contrary to published studies, a higher incidence of severe or life-threatening alcohol intoxication in male victims was found. In conclusion, this retrospective study shows that while many aspects of sharp force homicides tend to be universal, there may be slight differences in results when different countries are contrasted and files of different departments and time periods are analyzed. When such differences exist, meaning the age of the victims, they may sometimes be explained by the social and economic situation in the respective countries and regions. Key points. 1. Homicides by sharp force are the most frequent type of homicide in the Czech Republic. 2. The presence of both blunt force and sharp force trauma may be indicative of assault escalation. 3. Alcohol intoxication is more frequent in male victims and male perpetrators. 4. The sex and age of the victims may be related to the socioeconomic situation of the country. Then it gives you all the data provided, blah, 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 gives you all the footnotes here. Let me stop sharing that. All right, let me come back to chat. We made it through that one. Hopefully, I know it's kind of boring and it's a lot of reading and, it's just about knife wounds and knife attacks and all of this stuff. But the reason that I'm sharing this with you guys is because, there's a lot of other countries out there who've done studies on this because the reason they do the studies on the knife attacks is because they're countries that largely the people have no access to firearms and they have very high numbers of knife attacks in their countries and people being killed by stabbing. So that's why I wanted to bring up this study. I understand it's kind of boring. I get it. That's why I linked it for you guys. It's probably not the most interesting of topics, but these are the things that are going to be discussed. I hope you guys understand. Once this thing goes to trial, this is what we're going to be learning about. Sharp force injuries, right? Stabbings, statistical analysis. Were any of them intoxicated? How badly were they intoxicated? What was their toxicology? Talking about, male victims and perpetrators. They are the highest. They have the highest number for the intoxication before the crime is committed, right? Oh, you're just listening, V? Okay, cool. Danger, not boring? Oh, thank you. Cool. All right. So let me get over here. So now we're going to get back into some graphic things. So hopefully, these are the kinds of things that we're going to be whether we like it or not, once trial comes, even if we don't get to see this as the public, these are the things they're going to be talking about. So, a lot of these stab wounds here, right? As you can see, we have one here. This is the person with the knife still in them. This is a fairly large wound here, right up in the shoulder. Remember how they were talking about the left side seems to be what the person, if they want to kill you, they'll go for. And even you'll see a lot of here, right? Looks like, let's see. Yeah, see, like, look at this. All the stab wounds here on this person. And they're back here, right? Let's see. So, like, even here, right? Sharp force injuries around the neck. Sharp force injuries on the hands. Defensive wounds on the hands. Things like that. So, unfortunately, I know it sounds horrible, but this is literally exactly what we're going to be. Unfortunately, this kind of stuff is going to have to be talked about, even if we don't get to see the pattern. Another thing is, blood stain analysis, right? Blood spatter. It's going to be interesting to learn about the blood spatter analysis that was done inside the home, okay? Because if some of these victims have multiple stab wounds, from the first stab to the last one, every single time you bring that knife up and it comes back down for another stab, it is spraying blood all over the place. And when blood is in flight, it's uncontrollable. It goes everywhere. It splatters onto everything. A blood droplet will hit something, and then other tinier droplets will splatter off from that. So even the blood spatter analysis in this case is going to be very, very, very interesting. So yeah. Now this I can't give you guys a link for. I just literally Googled some images for wound patterns from a knife attack. If you guys want to, go through, find some of these links, do some of your own research, do some of your own digging. I just wanted to show this because it is what it is. This is what's going to be talked about, upcoming trial. So unfortunately, I know that's probably difficult for people and nobody wants to think of that, but it is a reality. They're going to try and say that Bryan Kohberger did this to 4 people in 8 minutes or less on his own and transferred none of the biological material. Now look at some of these injuries here, okay? Look at some of these injuries and what we've heard about this case with some of these victims here. Do you actually believe that Kohberger could have caused injuries, even anything similar to this, and not transferred any of that as he sped away from the crime scene? Right? Exactly. That's right. She said the facts of this case are very much in dispute. That's right. Exactly. So, I know it sounds messed up, but like the fact of the matter is, this is literally what they're going to be talking about, and they're gonna, and they're gonna try and do it delicately, but there is no delicate way to talk about this. There really isn't a delicate way to talk about the injury sustained on each victim. And there's no delicate way to try to talk about how he could have sustained these injuries, spent extra time with one of the victims, but yet he was still in and out in 8 minutes or less and transferred 0 biological material from the crime scene to the vehicle, right? Like, look at some of these injuries. You really believe that any of this could have been done to anybody in this home and not a single droplet, microscopic droplet of blood, hair, saliva, anything was transferred to his vehicle? No fucking way. There's just no way, not in my opinion. I don't care if he was wearing coveralls. I don't care if he was wearing a bed sheet. I don't care what he had on. Okay, according to everybody who thinks that he had some kind of kill kit and a painter suit and blah, blah, blah. I don't give a shit what he had on. Every single time that knife is coming out of someone and going back into them, blood is spraying all over the place. It's getting everywhere. And this is for 4 people, not just one. You're going from victim to victim, stabbing multiple times on multiple floors of the home. There's no way you didn't transfer a single droplet of biological material with you when you left the crime scene. You took some of that material with you. Absolutely. Anybody who thinks that he could have done this and not taken any biological material out of the home with him in 8 minutes or less, I'm of the opinion almost virtually impossible. If we were talking about a shooting, if we were talking about shooting 4 people, maybe you could get out of here without a single piece of the crime scene attached to you. But for stabbing, nope. 4 different people, 1 knife, nope. You absolutely would have taken something with you when you left. Something. It would have been on you, for sure. So, got one more thing here we can look at. And then I'm going to get going. Was it this one? Or was that the one I just looked at? Can't remember. Sorry. No, it's this one. Okay. Pathologyoutlines.com. I'm going to share this one with you because they actually have quite a few links in here that you can also click on the links, and it will, I think they're links for different cases, different evidence that they're referencing. You can click on the link for it and it will show you. So let's get over here. Autopsy and Forensics. It's from August 2021. It was last updated May 2022. Let's see. This is the typical knife contains, so it tells you, right? You're going to have the handle, the portion that can be gripped. You have the guard. You have the blade, atypical sharp, pointed objects that can be used to produce sharp force injuries, but are not limited to scissors, screwdrivers, fragments of glass, broken bottleneck, broken glasses, fork, ice picks, etc. And then each one of these little links, you can click on it. Sharp force wounds typically show cleanly divided edges and may involve different types of soft tissue damage, different types of tissue with the same contact. Depth of the wound track relative to the length of the cutaneous wound distinguishes a stab from an incision. Sharp force injuries can be subcategorized as follows: incise wounds, stab wounds, chop wounds, atypical wounds. Essential features. Incise wounds are typically superficial and longer than they are deep. Incise wounds must be distinguished from laceration. Tissue bridges are the hallmark of laceration. Stab wounds generally are deeper than their cutaneous length. Chop wounds are produced by heavy, relatively blunt objects with at least one sharp edge. Number and location of the wounds can give clues regarding the manner of death. Multiple deep stab wounds are generally seen in homicides. Progressively deeper wounds with a single fatal stab wound are typically seen in suicides. Accidental fatal sharp force deaths are rarely described. Progressively deeper wounds with a single fatal stab, typically seen in suicides. Interesting. Incise wounds, also called cuts or slashes. Surgical incision is a typical example of an incised wound, right? Surgical incision, when they make the little incision. Typical example. Wounds caused by sharp objects that contain a blade with at least one sharp edge, knives, razors, swords, etc. Produced by a tangential movement of the blade to the skin. Typically, wounds are superficial longer than they are deep. In most cases, incised wounds tend to be deeper at the point of the first contact with the skin, the entrance, and it becomes progressively more superficial as the wound approaches the exit. Wounds will show clear separation of the injured and uninjured tissue. Tissue bridges absent in the center of the wound. That's the images there. Let me go see what the image is before I can show it to you. Let me make sure I can even. Oh, yeah, okay, I could show you this. Hang on. I'll show you this one too real quick. Like I said, some of these have the you can click on the link and it will show you. So it's showing you here A1, B1, C1, D1, right? The injuries. Surface geometry of injured skin surface, bottom image, modeled using plasticine blocks that were then digitized. Okay. Interesting. Hang on, let me see what that's saying. Skin injury model classification based on shape vector analysis. Oh, okay. Skin injury surface characteristics. Cool. Okay, so you guys can click on those things if you're following along. Whatever. I dropped the thing for you, so let's get back over to here. Back over here. Okay. Let's see. Tissue bridging is caused by incomplete separation of stronger tissue elements such as blood vessels and nerves. Critical feature to differentiate incised wounds from laceration, the tear in tissue caused by blunt trauma, e.g. tearing or crushing. Based on the depth of penetration and the energy applied to the blade, there may be different wounds. Let's get down here. Stab wounds, also called puncture wounds. Wounds caused by a sharp-pointed object that enters the body during a more or less perpendicular penetration mechanism is the critical feature of stab wounds. To pressure, which is the force applied perpendicular to a surface. Oh, okay, P equals FA. Okay, cool. Stab wounds are typically deeper than their cutaneous length. I'm not going to click on the link here. You guys can. That's why I gave you the link for this. You can go click on all these photos and stuff. Every time I do it, I have to stop sharing and then share the next one. So whatever. Sharp-pointed objects penetrate the body, producing entrance wound, may show additional injuries due to the blunt mechanism of the knive's handle or guard. Patterned injuries, abrasions, bruises, etc. Wound track, usually with a dead end. Rarely an exit wound. For example, stab wounds to the upper extremities or high-energy stab wounds, like from arrows. No tissue bridges are present in the center of the wound. Critical features to differentiate stab wounds from laceration. When the knife is twisted into the body before withdrawal, there may be perpendicular wound shapes, V, L, Y, or irregular. So you may see a wound pattern that looks like a V, an L, or a Y. This is when the knife is twisted into the body before withdrawal. Imprint abrasions from the handle can be present. The handle's mark indicates that the entire blade penetrated the body and requires vigorous pressure. Chop wounds. Mixed injuries showing both patterns of sharp and blunt force, produced by various objects that are generally heavy, relatively blunt, and with at least one sharp edge. Chop wound appearance is going to look like a clean center due to the action of the sharp edge of the object on the tissue. The margins are less clean and regular than classic sharp force injuries due to the increased weight and thickness of the blade and the decreased sharpness of the blade. Bruising, abrasions, and crushing are usually present surrounding the center of the wound. Significant weight of the weapon allows for a high energy pressure mechanism that results in a cut of the tissues together with the evidence of bruising, abrasion, and crushing. Wound depth is usually variable due to the irregular penetration of the blade. No wound tails are typically observed due to the primary pressure mechanism. Chop wound mechanism involves high energy forces. Skin and soft tissue are usually lacerated. Fractures may be observed. When the head is involved, a typical linear dent is observed on the external surface of the cranium due to the action of the heavy blade. If the force exceeds the elastic thresholds of the cranium, then fractures will develop. When the extremities are involved, partial or full amputations may occur. Typical chop wounds, axes, crushing, fragmenting wounds with fractures. Cleavers, clean, narrow wounds with fractures at the entry site. Machetes, wider, less clean wounds with small fragments of bone at the entry site and fractures in the bed of the cut. Atypical chop wounds, boat propellers typically observed in bodies of water. Characteristically large, parallel wounds, variable in depth, usually set a few centimeters apart and showing a sliced nature. Evidence of hemorrhage within the soft tissue surrounding the wound is highly indicative of an antemortem injury. Absence of hemorrhage within the soft tissue surrounding the wound does not exclude an antemortem injury. Prolonged immersion in water washes away the blood. Okay, we don't need that. Tangential cuts may result in partial or complete skin and soft tissue flap wounds. Then it gets down here. Your atypical weapons are going to be scissors, broken glass, screwdrivers, ice pick, and forks. External examination and autopsy is what your medical examiner is going to want to do. Before manipulating the body, it is critical to take photographs of the body as it is received. Medical interventions may alter the shape and size of the wound. Clothing must be examined thoroughly to compare the number, size, and location of tissue defects to the wounds observed on the body. Anatomical location of the wounds must be described. Location can give clues regarding the manner of death. Number of wounds. Wounds can be described singularly or in clusters depending on the case. Each wound or cluster should be sequentially numbered. Size and shape of wounds. Wound margins can be more or less opposed, resulting in size and shape artifacts. Due to the skin and soft tissue elasticity in the direction of the fibroelastic fibers, Langer's lines or Langer lines of skin tension, wound edges should always be gently opposed to evaluate the length and shape of the lesion better. The wound paths and direction. Always remember that stabbing deaths are dynamic rather than static situations. Direction of the thrust is based on the skin wound feature and the wound track. Must be determined during the internal examination. Involved organs must be included in the report. Depth of the wounds. Due to the soft tissue elasticity, the wound depth does not necessarily represent the length of the blade. So just because you have a wound that's maybe 8 inches deep, it doesn't mean your blade was 8 inches deep. I wasn't an 8-inch blade. Vigorous stabs can indent the body surface, i.e. abdomen, and compress the soft tissues, allowing the blade to reach deep tissues and organs at a greater distance than the blade length. Suggested to describe the maximal depth as recorded during the autopsy, meaning the wound depth is not less than or the wound depth is approximately. Internal organs. Direct evidence of stab wounds can be observed in the involved organs, meaning heart, lungs, liver. Due to the respiratory phases, the lung can show injuries that are longer or shorter than the actual blade length. During inspiration, the lung expands and comes close to the chest wall, thus becoming easier to be involved by the stab wound. During the exhalation, the contraction of lung brings it away from the chest wall, making it harder to be reached by the blade. Evaluation of blood loss following sharp force trauma is suggested. Evaluation of blood loss. following a sharp force trauma is suggested. Signs of severe blood loss include extreme paleness of the internal organs, even if they are not directly involved. Sometimes bleeding is not excessive and death is due to vascular injury and complications, meaning embolism, embolism to the heart. Isn't that interesting, though? Evaluation of blood loss following sharp force trauma is suggested. Signs of severe blood loss include extreme paleness of the internal organs, even if they're not directly involved. Well, we know that there was someone in this house that lost a lot of blood because it was pouring out of the damn house, right? Post-mortem radiology. Radiology studies can be helpful in sharp force traumas. Post-mortem x-rays or computed tomography may show retained weapons or their fragments, allow for collection of evidence, help in preventing autopsy operators from accidental injuries, pneumothorax, or air embolism. Additional autopsy techniques are required to confirm. And then it shows you here this little picture of this post-mortem radiology. Wow, so that knife is still in this dude. I see. Interesting. I don't know if you guys, can you see that? Nope, you can't even see the picture I clicked on. Damn it. That's all right. I can see it. So this picture here, this is post-mortem radiology where the person still has the knife in them. Let's see. Manner of death. So let's see. These are the case reports. It shows 21-year-old man who died due to accidental femoral vessels injuries by a broken glass. 24-year-old man who committed suicide by transcranial stab wound. A 42-year-old man who committed suicide by more than 90 stab wounds. What? 45-year-old man who committed suicide by an atypical cutthroat injury. Isn't this interesting? 42-year-old man who committed suicide by more than 90 stab wounds, huh? Interesting. Cook County Medical Examiner's Office. Okay, so we have incised wounds here, stab wound here, chop wound to the head, wound tailing, this is that dovetailing they talk about, the wound margin approximation, hesitation marks, active defense wounds, a partial skin flap that looks like from a frickin' machete, a vascular injury, V-shaped stab wound. That's from when it gets put in and twisted, it's going to leave a V, a Y, an L-shaped. Interesting. Ice pick, cross tip of a screwdriver, scissors. Oh, the pale organs. Okay. A heart stab wound, a lung stab wound, and pale organs from blood loss. Board review style question number 1. What is the injury shown in the picture? And then it gives you your choice. Oh, okay. Board review. Okay. Look at this. So they even gave him a little test, huh? What kind of wound is this? B. Incised wound. The wound shown in the picture is a typical example of an incised wound. The white arrow indicates the wound tail commonly observed in an incised wound. Wounds are superficial and longer than they are deep. Board review style question 2. So these are your board review style questions you're going to get. Based on the findings shown in this picture, what is the most probable manner of death? Homicide. This picture shows a typical example of an active defense wound. These wounds are generally produced by the attempt of the victim to grab the blade. Suicidal sharp force injuries are generally multiple and located to the wrist, neck, or chest. Interesting. Accidental sharp force injuries. Interesting. Okay, so did I share this with you? I hope I did. Let me just, in case, do this again. I think this is incredibly informative, and there's so many links in this one that you guys can click on and go look at all the pictures and everything if you want. There you go. Borg. I know, right? Borg. All right, so now that we got to cover a couple of things. I didn't want to get too graphic today, but I did want to kind of give just a brief example of some of the things that are likely going to be talked about in this case once we start getting to trial. And it is what it is. The medical examiner is absolutely going to have to talk about these things. These things are going to be brought up. Injury patterns on victims are going to be talked about. And, they're trying to claim that he stabbed all 4 of these people in 8 minutes or less and didn't transfer a single shred of biological material from the crime scene with him. He took nothing with him when he left the crime. I find that to be incredibly unbelievable. And I find it to be incredibly unbelievable they didn't find a single knife in this house. But anyways, just wanted to, same page, more than 90 wounds. Right. That's what I'm saying, Fitzy, right? So isn't that interesting that one of the cases that they cited there happens to be a case of suicide, and this person stabbed themselves over 90 times, huh? Interesting. So isn't it interesting to note that just because someone has a whole bunch of stab wounds on them doesn't mean someone did it to them. There's a chance they did it to themselves. Just saying. So, remember in the very beginning too, they were asked, are you sure this wasn't a, homicide/suicide type event? Remember the reporter asking that? Are you sure in the very beginning? Was this some kind of, it's very interesting when you see that one of these cases in this study that they're citing literally is someone who stabbed themselves 90 times. So, I'm just saying these are the things that are going to be talked about. It's going to go back and forth between both sides, state and defense. And these are likely some of the things that we're going to see and hear talked about at the upcoming trial. So it's very interesting when you think about it, right? Fact of the matter is that even in the other study that we read out of the Czech Republic, right? Almost 60%, maybe it was 80%, 82% of the cases, it's a male perpetrator. And that male perpetrator, 70% of the time is incredibly, incredibly intoxicated. Right? Isn't that interesting? So even in the Czech Republic, when doing their study and comparing it to the rest of the world, not only is it like 82% of the people who committed the stabbings a male perpetrator, but that male perpetrator was also almost 80% of the time incredibly intoxicated. So it's very interesting, huh? But yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember them asking me about that, right? You remember that, Audrey, in the very beginning, they asked if that's what this was. So I don't know. Yeah, exactly, right? If you stab yourself that many times, right? I know. Well, that's why I gave you guys the link. That way, if you want to go click on that yourself, go read it. You know what I mean? I have it open here. I'll probably go click on it later. I got to get going soon. But I did want to share just a couple of the things that I found when it comes to, stabbing victims, some of the studies that we know about stabbing victims, some of the percentages of who the perpetrator is, things like that. And, we got an interesting statistic out of it too, that it's a high percentage of these stabbings where it's a suicide. It's a suicide. So wasn't expecting that high of a number, right? But It is what it is. So, I don't know how informative that was. I don't know how much of a, I tried my best to try to just talk about a few things that I think are going to eventually come up at trial and, give you a few of the links and things like that. And then, of course, you guys can go off and maybe do your own research and find your own stuff too, right? I know Audrey loves reading peer-reviewed journals and things like that. So, but yeah, hopefully, it was at least somewhat educational and informative for you guys. And, you know, I didn't want to go too crazy with the graphic stuff, but I did want to show at least some of the different injury patterns that we could see. So, oh, well, thanks, Fitzy. Appreciate you, honey. But yeah, I do got to get going. I got other things to do. It is Sunday, and I just wanted to try to do this as quick as I could, you know what I mean, and get some information in. It was just a couple things I was looking over yesterday. I figured, well, I had a little bit of time today to do it. But yes, as Fitzy says, do your own research, people. Don't listen to nothing I say. I shared the links. If I remember, I will go and try to include them in the description of the video. But I got things to do, so I can't promise you that I'm going to remember to do that, okay? But, oh, well, you're welcome, Audrey. I know you love reading those peer-reviewed journals too and reports. So maybe you'll find some that are far more interesting than what I could find. But I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for your super stickers, your super chats. If you sent a little something to the Cash App, thank you so much. I don't know where my Mercy Cat is or where she's been, but I'm concerned. Mercy Cat, if you catch this on the replay, love you. Hope you're doing well. And Eddie, wherever you are, hope you're well too, Eddie. Don't know where you've been, but take care, buddy. And yeah, mods, love you. Thank you for being here. You guys have a great day. Catch you on the flip side. I'm sure I'll see you around tonight. Take care. Be safe. Bye.